Okay, so we're gonna actually start now. Definitely going to start now. Right. So in terms of what we'll be looking at, we'll be looking at coordination and control. And when we speak of coordination and control, we're basically talking about the systems within the human body that help to control the different body parts and of course coordinate them in terms of different organs or different system working together. So on the screen you're looking at notes that is related to the human nervous system, and the that is simple because the nervous system is one of those system that is known as the coordinated system. Basically, we have two systems: the endocrine system and, of course, the nervous system. Those are two systems of the human body that help with controlling and coordinating in terms of ensuring that the different body parts are communicating. Because let's say, for example, you somebody should throw a ball at you, and you're gonna catch that ball. Then, of course, the eyes need to communicate or coordinate with your hands, because you're gonna catch the ball by using both hands. So those two different body parts will have to able to work together properly in order for this to take place. So the nervous system help that proper working ability of these two different body parts. So the nervous system is what help to bridge that gap in terms of communication. So when we look at coordination and control, we're basically talking about the nervous system and of course the hormonal system, which is of course endocrine system. So as for the nervous system control and coordinate the body parts and processes. So in terms of controlling and coordinating, that simply means that it actually allow them to work together. It ensure that they are communicating properly once they are actually working. And I would have given you that example in terms of the human eyes coordinating with your hands. That is, if somebody should throw a ball towards you for you to catch. The second pointer, it receives sensory stimuli from internal and external environment. So stimuli is basically anything within your environment that cause you to react. If you're in an environment and somebody all of a sudden turn up that music, then that music is the new stimulus. So anything that actually cause you to react to it in terms of sound, noise, those can be termed as stimulus. You're walking or you're sitting and you touch something sharp and you react to that sharp object. In that situation, that sharp object is the stimulus. Presently, for those persons who are listening to me on the class, I'm your stimulus because you're reacting to whatever I'm seeing. If all of a sudden somebody should come into your room or in your environment where you're at home now, and you should switch and start to pay attention to that person, then that person becomes your stimulus. So your stimulus content constantly change as you go through your day. Now you will realize on the screen you're seeing stimuli, but I'm saying stimulus, and that is simply because if you're talking about one, that is when I use the term stimulus. If you're talking about more than one or the plural, it is stimuli. So you will so you have to know when to change those terms in terms of stimulus and stimuli. So stimulus is whenever you're talking about just one, while stimuli is whenever you're talking about more than one. So moving on, it responds in a coordinated manner. Very important. Now your nervous system, in terms of communicating the different terms of communicating the different body parts. For example, um, allowing your ears to communicate with your hands, allowing your eyes to communicate with your hands. They are saying that it does so in a coordinated way. And what they mean is that if somebody is throwing a ball towards you for you to catch, the only way you can catch that ball properly is by you timing the ball properly so that you actually close your hands when the ball drop in your hand. Because you will realize that whenever you're catching an object, a ball for example, as soon as the ball drop inside your hand middle, you have to basically kind of close it or else it will bounce out. So human being can do that effectively because of the coordinated effort of your nervous system. That means that your nervous system time the ball properly and allow your muscles to contract so that you can hold the ball as soon as it actually enter your hand, your both hands. So that's what I mean by the its respond. It is actually in a coordinated manner. That simply means that the body parts them basically move in a coordinated manner so that different things can be carried out in terms of the function of the nervous system. Right, so after looking at the definition or what the nervous system is mainly about, then the next concept is for us to look at what is known as the divisions of the nervous system. Now, the heading I have two divisions. Yes, just it should be three. Right, so three divisions it should be. Because textbook, lower school textbook and all of that will only give you two divisions, and those would be the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. But of course there's another one. I realize the screen top share. Student, once you're not seeing the screen, tell me that you're not seeing it, because once I'm teaching I'm actually sharing my screen, but sometimes for whatever reason it stops share. Right, so I'm saying that divisions of the nervous system, so that entire nervous system, it is divided into three different divisions, which we'll be spending some time looking at those divisions individually. So the first division of your nervous system is known as the CNS, and CNS stand for Central Nervous System. That is CNS. So of course you at times you will be asked to list or state or give the different divisions of the nervous system. So you have the central, abbreviation is CNS. You have the peripheral, and abbreviation is PNS. And we have this one that is known as the autonomic nervous system. So look at it, look at the spelling. It is not automatic, it is autonomic. So autonomic nervous system, that's the third one that we'll be spending some time looking at. So let's get into each of those nervous system and see how they are compiled in terms of the different body parts, different part of the body where you can find these aspects of the nervous system. So the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. That's the first thing that you need to know as for the central nervous system. You need to know the components or the parts that make up this nervous system. And pointer number one would have taken care of that. So right away, student, definitely common question I ask you, CXE asks you, or whosoever asks you to give them the components or give them the parts that make up the central nervous system. And those parts are the brain and the spinal cord over the diagram to your right. You have the brain there labeled, and as for the spinal cord, you also have the spinal cord label. So the spinal cord, it is basically a long nerve that run from the base of the brain. Or if you want to say the brain, no problem. Run right through your back, and it actually run through a bone that is known as the vertebral column or the backbone. Right, so that bone that you can feel through the center or within the center of your back, in the middle of that bone, that is where the spinal cord is located. So the spinal cord does normally run from the base or the bottom section of your brain right down to the lower back. So next, so that is the first pointer there, as I said, it would take care of the components or the two main parts that make up your central nervous system. Now, what it does, the second pointer, the control center of the body. That's the description that attached to it. It is the control center of the human body. So what this is now saying is that every communication that's supposed to take place among the different body parts, it is your central nervous system that is at the center of it, in terms of ensuring that every parts of the human body, they are actually working together, and that they are not just working together, but they are doing so in a coordinated way. Point 3, receives and transmits messages to all body parts. And of course, I mean, this pointer is self-explanatory, because I mean, I would have been going over that concept more than once since I started the class, saying that the nervous system basically is what communicate, what link, what allow all body parts to talk to each other. You understand? Because the only way the human body can work properly is by the body parts communicating with each other, and not just communicating, but communicating effectively. So those 3 pointers just giving you some background knowledge as to what is the central nervous system, or if you want to shorten it by just writing CNS, no problem. So let's move on to our next division of the nervous system. Right, so this is the next part of the nervous system. So I mean, just like you would have a motor car and you have different parts on the motor car. You have the mirror, you have the wheel, you have the steering, you have the chair, and the list goes on in terms of different parts. So same thing we are looking at in terms of the nervous system. We're looking at different parts or different divisions that make up the nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system now, also known as the PNS, they are saying that the first pointer is saying made up of cranial and spinal nerve. So again, this first pointer telling you exactly of the components that make up this peripheral nervous system. So it's made up of cranial and spinal nerves. Cranial and spinal nerves. Moving on. Take messages to and from. Take messages to and from. Let minimize distance. What's going on? Okay. So take messages to and from CNS, and CNS is the central nervous system. Soon get it shared back. Student, just give me a moment. Soon get it shared back. Right, so take messages to and from the central nervous system. So that's the peripheral nervous system, and You looking at the image and the slide, you will realize where the peripheral nervous system is. So the peripheral nervous system, it is basically pure nerves. Because if you realize it's a cranial and spinal nerves. Right. So so internal the nervous system, the the nerves them they are part of the peripheral nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, ANS. Now, this now they are saying the first pointer regulates the functions of our internal organs, such as your heart, your stomach, and your intestine. Then what this is saying is that there are some movement, there are some functions, there are some processes within the human body which, yes, you are aware that they are taking place, but definitely they are actually taking place inside the human body, and they actually stimulated by internal condition. What this means is that you cannot tell your heart, you cannot tell your lungs not to work. They will work once they are in healthy condition. The only way your lungs and heart will stop work is whenever they are not in any healthy condition anymore. So the first pointer regulates the functions of your internal organs, such as your heart, your stomach, and intestine. So all these organs. Let's look at the stomach, for example. If you should now consume some food, let's say for example an hour from now, 2 hours from now, that food that you consume, it should actually start to process. It should be really deep down in terms of process, in terms of their digestive system. Now what I'm saying is that you cannot tell your stomach not to help to digest the food. You can't tell a stomach that, because the walls of the stomach produce a very important acid that is called hydrochloric acid. Once you eat, your stomach walls produce an acid that is called hydrochloric acid. Okay? Now, you cannot tell the stomach not to digest the food, or you cannot tell the stomach not to produce any such water, because that water there, I mean, very important. All right, so the heart. Now let's say for example, the human heart need to pump some blood. You also cannot tell the human heart not to pump the blood. Once the human heart realize that some blood need to be pumped as a result of the communication that is done via or by the autonomic nervous system, then your heart will automatically start to pump the blood. So if you realize, you will realize that throughout your entire life there have not been a point in time where you can tell these organs to work or not to work, because they are internal. You cannot control them. So it is the autonomic nervous system that control them, or that allow them to work automatically. Now, your arms, your legs, for example, you can decide if you want to walk, yes or no. So the arms and your legs will not fall under this category, because those are external body parts, or those are external body organs which you have conscious control over. Second pointer, the ANS is part of the peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system is the second one that we would have looked at. So they are saying that the autonomic nervous system is basically a part of that peripheral nervous system. Also control muscular contraction, and as you can say, it's a within the body. So that simply means that it is muscles that are internal. It will control. So if you realize the autonomic nervous system basically control body parts, or it control body functions that are internal. Anything that take place inside of your body. Point of 4, we are often unaware of the ANS, and ANS again is autonomic nervous system, because it functions involuntary and reflexible. Okay, now what this is saying is that the functions normally take place or initiate involuntary. That involuntary mean that you don't volunteer to do that function, yes or no. The human body just automatically start to do that movement in terms of function. For example, we do not notice when blood vessel change size or when our heart beats faster. So these are internal bodily functions which we're not aware of these some of the time. So that's what they are saying. So in terms of blood vessels, the blood vessels might increase in size sometime or reduce in size. But they are saying that of course you will not notice it because those are internal functions. The brain now. So the human brain, once you're looking at the nervous system, then the human brain must be a part that you have to study in terms of knowing the different labelings and some basic functions of those labelings. So the first section or the first part of the brain is the cerebrum, and looking at the screen you will realize where is labeled as the cerebrum on this image. So once you're able to identify or locate the cerebrum of the brain, then the next thing for you to know is what are the functions. The first point I don't really give you the function. The first point is just describing it, where they are saying that the bulk of the brain. So they are saying that the cerebrum is the bulk of the brain, and why they are saying that it is the bulk of the brain is simple base and size. Somebody have their hand up. Let's see. Person of the hand up. Who is it? Hand up. Or the person lower the hand. Who had the hand up a while ago? Who wanted to ask a question? Or it was a mistake. Is it you, Walker? Mona Lisa, you? Who? Alright, so I'm gonna move on. Alright, so the second pointer, responsible for voluntary actions. So that's one of the functions of your cerebrum, which is located in the brain, which of course is the bulk of the brain. So what the bulk of the brain mean that of all the parts of the brain, the cerebrum will be the largest part. So most of the brain is labeled as the cerebrum. That's all they are saying. That's why they would have said that it is the bulk of the brain. Responsibility, responsible for voluntary actions. So voluntary actions include any external action that you decide to do. So it does not matter what you decide to do, but in terms of voluntary, it means that you would have volunteered to walk, go towards that object, or move, or start to run faster. All of those are examples of voluntary actions. Second, and the third point also going into depth, telling you some things. So it is saying that the cerebrum controls speech, right? So for those persons who can speak properly, that simply means that their cerebrum is really healthy. For those persons who have a problem speaking, right, that simple mean that their cerebrum is not working properly. Thinking. So they are saying that in order for you to think logically, I mean, class is going on now in order for you to think and try to process and understand the information. The cerebrum, that section or that part of the brain, is a part of the brain that help to do that actually help to do that. Emotions, right? So of course everybody have emotions. Some of us we basically, I mean, react certain ways. Some persons easy to change, to get down in terms of change of mood, easy to cry and all those things. That is what is known as emotion, right? So they are saying that the cerebrum is the part of your brain that is responsible for dealing with emotion. Personality also, right? So your personality now. Also, the cerebrum coordinates messages to and from the brain. That is the cerebrum. So we have a whole lot of functions there that the cerebrum is responsible for. Next part of the brain. So if you realize this spelling different now, so this one is called cerebellum, right? So there is a different in terms of spelling, which of course there should be a difference in terms of pronunciation. What it is the function of the cerebellum now? Controls muscular coordination, balance, posture, and muscle tone. Right. So anything what we do with the physical function in the physical appearance of the human body, the cerebellum is the part of the brain that is responsible for it. So muscular coordination, now muscular coordination again mean your muscles contracting and relaxing, causing some form of movement. That is what is known as muscular coordination. Balancing now. Right. So in order for you to walk, you have to walk on both legs now. Let's say for example, every time you walk, you're it's like you're falling, then that simply means that the cerebellum is not working properly. So for persons who drink a lot of alcohol, you will realize that when persons are when an individual is intoxicated in terms of drinking alcohol or and drinking too much, then when I say the person drunk, they must stagger, they must lean when they walk in. So it is a situation where now the cerebellum would have been affected due to the fact that you would have consumed the alcoholic beverages. Right, so a very important function. Posture. Now, your posture is basically the correct positioning of the human body. So posture in terms of you walking properly, standing properly, right? That is where posture come into play. So the cerebellum also help you to form those posture, and it is also responsible for muscular tone. Medulla oblongata. Right, anybody hearing this word for the first time? Medulla oblongata, and your persons all right with the pronunciation, meaning that you can pronounce the word, right? Which one like your problem, Davis? Oblongata? Are you okay with it? The O one. Alright, how you pronounce it? OB, long, right, LON and GAT, oblongata. I must say DATA, data, you know. So GATA, agata, you understand? So oblongata, so medulla oblongata. Pronunciation is not difficult, man. So this part of the brain, and looking at the diagram, you will realize where it is located. It is located way down the bottom section of the brain. So as for the medulla oblongata, it controls involuntary action. It control internal organ functioning such as your heartbeat, your breathing rate, peristalsis, and of course temperature regulation. So those are some internal body functions that the medulla oblongata control. So swallowing, of course, would be under that category. So let's say, for example, you eat some food. In order for you to swallow the food properly, and the whole swallowing process should start in terms of, in order for them to start to work or initiate you to swallow the food, then of course the medulla oblongata is the section or the part of the brain that made that decision. All right, so we have a next word, Hypothalmus. Hypo. So HYPO, hypo. Then you have TH, thalamus. So the hypothalamus, that's the next part of the brain. So as for the hypothalamus, they are saying it forms the floor and sides of the brain. So the last bottom section of the brain, we would have called, say, all right, the floor of the brain, and the sides of the brain, they are saying that the hypothalamus is located within those areas. And we have, in terms of its function, it controls all of those things. Your hypothalamus control your blood pressure, it control your heart rate, peristaltic, gut movement, and that is swallowing. So the whole swallowing process, you consuming some food in order for you to swallow the food properly, the hypothalamus must be working accordingly to allow you to swallow food. The pituitary glands, next part of the brain, and looking at the diagram again, you can see the pituitary gland. So as for water content, the pituitary gland help to control water content. The pituitary gland also help to control body temperature, regulate body temperature. So let's say, for example, the time is hot. The pituitary gland aid in that process in terms of ensuring that your body heat or the body temperature go down back to its normal level. Pituitary gland also produce a hormone that is called ADH. So ADH, that is abbreviation. As for the pronunciation, another word that some person might say hard to pronounce, but it's not hard. Antidiuretic hormone. So the antidiuretic hormone, otherwise known as the ADH, it have to do with something with you urinating. While looking at the kidneys or excretion, then we will spend some time looking at antidiuretic hormone, which I think would have covered some concept of it in human and social biology. Right, so definitely add some parts of the brain that you need to know. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, so basically 5 important parts of the brain that you should be aware of in terms of their roles, their functions, and of course where they are located. So again, just recapping a bit as far the concept would have covered. So of course, I said the main thing that we are looking at is coordination and control, and I would have said at the start of the class that we have 2 main systems that do this coordination and control of the entire human body, and that would be your hormonal system and your nervous system. So the nervous system is what we are looking at now. So we would have started by looking at what's the main function of the nervous system, and the first point I give you that where it said that it control and coordinate the body parts and processes. Then of course we would have gone into the different divisions that make up the nervous system. So that entire nervous system, rather than we studying it all at once in just one big bundle, right? They would have segmented into into three different divisions, of course, and one is known as the CNS, central nervous system. Parts that make up the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, and then they are saying that we have what is known as the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, right? So, and peripheral nervous system definitely work with another section or another division that is known as the autonomic nervous system. As for the autonomic nervous system, your internal processes, your internal body parts are controlled by this division. And of course, the different parts of the brain, what we would have just gone through. So let's look at some other components or other things that make up your nervous system, because a while ago, we actually look at a component which would be the brain. So the brain is a part of the nervous system, just that the brain have different parts. So now we're looking at another part of the nervous system known as nerves and neurons. So just like how the brain have different parts, the nerves and neurons have different parts. Alright, so in terms of the first point, messages are sent from the central nervous system to the rest of the body in the form of electrochemical signal called nerve impulses. So the central nervous system, again, it is the main system and it consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So they are saying in terms of communication, in terms of messages, the central nervous system is that part of the nervous system that coordinating, and they are saying that it basically sends some message from the central nervous system to the rest of the body in the form. So the format by which those information travel is known as electrochemical signal, and they give it a name, and the name is nerve impulses. So once you hear the term nerve impulses, we're basically talking about messages are information being sent within, of course, the nerve or the nervous system, the neuron there. Second pointer, the impulses are carried by the nerve cell or neurons. So in the nervous system, it is your nerve cells that do the transportation, and of course they are otherwise known as neurons. So what you're seeing in terms of the labeling, you're seeing example of a nerve and the different parts that make up the nerve. Alright, so nerve and neuron. So a nerve now, a bundle of many nerve fibers connecting the central nervous system with parts of the body. While a neuron, and also known as a nerve cell, specialized for the rapid transfer of electrical impulses. So our messages are, if you want to actually say, information. In terms of the direction, now the information they are saying that it sends messages in one direction. So in terms of neurons, we have some neurons that are called sensory neurons. We have relay neuron, or if you want to say intermediate neurons. So these different types of neurons basically send information in only one direction. We have an extent that, as you know, as the motor neuron. So the sensory neuron, that neuron is what take information from your sense organ and take that information to your brain. The sensory neuron basically does that. Now, of course, neuron we have different types. So, and I would have just said sensory. So, sensory neuron don't collect information from the body parts and transmit it towards the brain and spinal cord, which would be the central nervous system. So, the image that you're seeing now is basically somebody using their fingers to actually prick the finger with a tack. So, basically, it is something sharp. So at the tip of the finger, we have those sensory neuron in terms of the nervous system that will help to detect that information. Because if you accidentally touch something sharp, for example, or something hot, persons will realize how fast they remove their hand from that hot object that you would have accidentally touched. So all of that information from the tip of the finger where the object would have burned you, the information is taken to your central nervous system in order for it to process and a decision being made. And that decision must be for you to remove your hand from that object. So that happened in a split second. That happened very fast. So in order for the information to leave the tip of your finger and go towards your brain, it is the sensory neuron that help to actually carry the information right there. So again, collect information from the body parts. So it will actually, the body part in this case would be one of your finger. So it is the central neuron that will take the information from the finger there, transmit or actually take it to the brain and spinal cord for evaluation and analysis and decision being made. So the motor neuron now. So using the same example, you touch something at something sharp. In order for that information to leave the fingertip, it need the service of the sensory neuron to do that. So now we are looking at the motor neuron. Now, after your brain received that information saying that you touched something hot, the brain now need to send back some information to the muscles of your arms, telling them that they need to contract so you can remove your hand and don't get burned anymore. It is the motor neuron that does this communication. So if you're listening properly, you'll realize that the sensory neuron take information from body part to the central nervous system, while the motor neuron take information from the central nervous system to the body part. It is just that then say effector organ and then say muscle. So the muscles of your hands that will contract and allow you to remove your hand from that hot object. In order for the muscle to get those information, it is the motor neuron that will carry that information from the brain to that particular muscle so that it can contract. So we have a next type of neuron that is known as the intermediate or the relay neuron. So looking at the image, you will see it in the middle, right? So on the screen, you will actually see it. So we have the three types of neurons on the screen. To the extreme left, you have the motor neuron. In the middle, you have the intermediate neuron, or if you want to say the relay neuron. And then we have what is known as the sensory neuron. So you should be able to label and, of course, identify these two types of neurons. So after looking at neuron, of course, the next concept should be looking at, of course, the different parts that make up the neuron there. Alright, so in terms of the different parts that make up the neuron, we have one section, we have one part that is called the cell body. And if you look at the image, you will actually see where is labeled as the cell body. We have a section that is known as the axon, we have the myelin sheath, we have the dendrite. So those are parts, those are sections, those are components that make up, of course, the neuron. And if you look carefully, you realize that those parts, they have their different functions. Alright, so in looking at the nervous system, we have different types of course, actions that your body make, and these actions, some of them you will decide to do those things, and some of them you will not decide. Right, so the fact that you may decide to do a particular, carry out a particular task, then that task, that the fact that you decide to carry out a task would simply mean that you volunteer to do it. So there are some actions that are known as voluntary actions, mean that you decide to do those, while there are also some actions that are called involuntary, and that simply means that you wouldn't have decided to do those things. So as for voluntary action, as you can see on the screen there, I guess this is showing a closet. The green one marks screw you, have a nice day, and the yellow one, so this person apparently is getting dressed. So this individual now need to choose one of those. You understand? So the fact that the person gonna choose one of those mean that the person will volunteer to choose the one that they want to choose. So this is a voluntary action. So actions which are under the person's control, we normally call those voluntary. Right, so the fact that you will decide if you want to wear the green one or the yellow one, that simply means that you would have actively volunteered to do so. So the person decide to carry out the action. So this individual must decide to carry out a particular action, whether they're gonna wear the green one or if they want to wear the yellow one. Alright, so students have some questions. I don't know, give you some questions just to stretch your imagination, just to ensure that of course you basically following the concept. Right there. Just post a question in the chat section there. Okay, students. So these are just some practice questions. Very simple question. The first one, yes. Anybody gone into the chat section? Student, you fall asleep, man. So there are some basic questions there. Two, for example, said give two function of the nervous system. What are the types of neuron? So just use these as some practice questions, so you can write it off. Once you write off the questions, then you can definitely dismiss yourself. Again, in terms of explanation, if there is something that you're not clear on, remember that the link is always there. And the link, what I would have done, I would have paste all the link in the Google Classroom. So when you go in the Google Classroom where the notes are, when you click on the control and coordination, once this class is finished, then I'm gonna paste the link for the YouTube video there. So you can, so all the topics that we would have covered, the video there actually beside the notes. So you can always play and replay. And of course, I will be pasting post. Well, the link is already posted in the WhatsApp group. So please remember to mark your name in the WhatsApp group, indicate that you're present. So thanks.